Order, please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Jeffrey.
Present.
Brubaker.
Here.
Kimmons.
Here.
Davis.
Here.
Kaiser.
Here.
Thank you. You've all had a copy of the agenda of tonight's meeting. Is there any additions or corrections to the agenda? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any opposed? If anyone is here this evening that intends to address council about any of the issues on the agenda or anything else, please fill out the green cards that are in the back. And when you are ready to speak, please present them to the clerk, and you'll have a maximum of 4 minutes to address council. Moving on to the minutes of the last meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes of the last council meeting? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been motioned and seconded. All those in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Crane, any recognition of visitors?
None at this time, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll move on to communication request number 2, request to hold 2020 homecoming.
Yes, Mayor, we received the request for the 2020 homecoming parade on September 18th. This is going to be the same downtown route as the previous years. Public Safety has reviewed it and is recommending that it be approved.
Very well. Any discussion? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Request approved. Number 3.
Yes, Mayor, this request is for the Veterans Day Parade on November 14th at 1 p.m. It's also a downtown route, and Public Safety's reviewed this and is recommending approval.
All right. Any discussion of the parade? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
It's been motioned. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and seconded. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Requests approved. Moving on to ordinances and resolutions. Number 4, an ordinance.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I have an ordinance approving a second amendment to development agreement and providing further authority.
All right, there's a motion for the reading. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been motioned and seconded. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? First reading.
An ordinance approving a second amendment to development agreement and providing further authority.
All right, you've heard the reading. Any discussion? Hearing none, second reading.
An ordinance approving a second amendment to development agreement and providing further authority.
Mr. Crane, any comment on the difference between the current one? Is this just an extension, or is there anything else?
Yeah, primarily an extension of the term through the end of this year, calendar year.
Okay. Any further questions? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
It's been motioned and seconded. Roll call, please.
Jeffrey.
Yes.
Brubaker.
Yes.
Kimmons.
Yes.
Davis.
Yes.
Kaiser.
Yes.
Motion carries. Ordinance pass. Number 5, an ordinance.
Mr. Mayor, I have an ordinance establishing the tax levy for the city of Moberly, Missouri for the year 2020.
All right. There's a motion for the reading of the ordinance. Is there a second?
Second.
Been motioned and seconded. All those in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any opposed? First reading.
An ordinance establishing the tax levy for the city of Moberly, Missouri for the year 2020.
All right, you've heard the first reading. Any discussion? Hearing none, second reading.
An ordinance establishing the tax levy for the city of Moberly, Missouri for the year 2020.
All right, you've heard the second reading of the ordinance. Any further discussion? All right, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
It's been motioned. Is there a second?
Second.
Motioned and seconded. Roll call, please.
Brubaker,
Yes.
Simmons,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Kaiser,
Yes.
Jeffrey.
Yes. Ordinance passes. Moving on to number 6, an ordinance.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I have an ordinance amending section 46-3 by including definitions for mobile food trucks and mobile food vending and amending section 46-118, and I ask that it be read twice for passage.
You sure you don't want to read all that?
No, I don't.
All right, there's a motion for the reading, briefly, I hope. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been motioned and seconded. All those in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any opposed? First reading.
An ordinance amending section 46-3 by including definitions for mobile food trucks and mobile food vending, and amending section 46-118, permitting mobile food trucks and mobile food vending in B1, B2, B3, and M1 zoning districts, and adopting section 46-146, setting forth mobile food truck and mobile food vending regulations, and adopting Article 13 to Chapter 12.
All right, you've heard the first reading. Any further discussion? All right, we'll do one, and then Cole may have one. I'll come back to
Fair
you.
enough.
First question.
My question is, if this passes tonight, when does it go into effect?
Yeah.
Immediately? Okay, I'll say.
Anyone else? Okay, Mr. Kaiser?
Second question is, I know there says so many days per year or 12 months. Does that calendar start tonight? Or does that, if it passes, or does that a calendar year? So from now on, every August 18th or something is when the clock resets on the ordinance?
Well, it's based on when they initiate the service. Yeah. So it's whenever the food truck
Whenever
starts.
they start.
Yeah.
Fair enough. That's my question.
Good. Anyone else? All right, second reading.
An ordinance amending section 46-3 by including definitions for mobile food trucks and mobile food vending, and amending section 46-118, permitting mobile food trucks and mobile food vending in B1, B2, B3, and M1 zoning districts, and adopting section 46-146, setting forth mobile food truck and mobile food vending regulations, and adopting Article 13 to Chapter 12.
All right, you've heard the second reading. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
It's been motioned and seconded. Roll call, please.
Simmons,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Kaiser,
Yes.
Jeffrey,
Yes.
Brubaker,
Yes.
Thank you. Ordinance passes. Moving on to number 7, a resolution.
Mr. Mayor, I have a resolution approving a lease agreement with Marine Toys for Tots Foundation for property located at 218 West Reed Street, and authorizing the city manager to execute the lease. I ask to be read twice for approval.
All right, you heard the motion for the reading of the resolution. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been motioned and seconded. All those in favor signify by aye. Aye. First and only reading.
A resolution approving a lease agreement with Marine Toys for Tots Foundation for property located at 218 West Reed Street, and authorizing the city manager to execute the lease.
All right, you've heard the reading. Any further discussion? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been motioned and seconded. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Resolution passes. Moving on to number 8, a resolution.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I have a resolution authorizing the city manager of the city of Moberly, Missouri to execute an engagement letter with Cunningham, Vogel, and Roast as bond counsel.
All right, you've heard the motion for the reading of the resolutions. Is there a second?
Second?
It's been motioned and seconded. All those in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any opposed? First and only reading.
A resolution authorizing the city manager of the city of Moberly, Missouri to execute an engagement letter with Cunningham, Vogel, and Roast as bond counsel.
All right, you've heard the reading. Any discussion? Mr. Davis? Pull your mic down a
The
little.
number 4, point 4 on the agreement addresses conflicts, and it states it allows CBR to take on new clients even if the interest of such clients in those matters is directly adverse to the city. Mr. Thompson, can you expound on that? That sounds a little out of sorts to me. I mean, I've never seen this clause in there. So they could take on a new client, and it could, and as such, it could have come in direct conflict with us and affect us adversely.
Theoretically, yes. If that were to happen, they would have a legal obligation to advise us about the conflict of interest, so we could take appropriate steps at that time if we wanted to. They still have the duty to advise us if there's a conflict.
Are you comfortable with this clause? You are? Okay.
Anyone else?
I have one.
Mr. Kimmons?
How does that impact client privilege and that sort of thing? I mean, obviously, they would be privy to all of our information and privy then to the other. Okay. All right, it does not relieve that. Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? I think this one is for Mr. Crane. I'll ask this is, the bonds are issued by the CID as part of the NID. So why would they be the bond counsel through the city, not through the CID? Because technically, we're not the ones issuing the bonds. So why would we be retaining the bond counsel?
No, the city is the one that issues the bonds. It is ultimately.
So it has an inter-agreement between that and the borrowing party? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
So we have an agreement with the CID, and then remember, the way that this NID is getting paid back is through the property tax through the CID, is a
Right.
portion of it. And then the utility department is paying for a portion of it as well.
So they will be obligated by contract to pay out of the CID taxes the interest and
Yep.
principal payments to
Yes.
pay the
And
bonds?
that was approved a few meetings ago.
Okay.
I don't remember what month.
Mr. Kaiser?
Am I correct that we also use Mr. Cunningham for the other bond issues, like other SIDs, not SIDs, but the other taxing districts? Haven't we used them for other things?
Sometimes,
So it's more than just a SID.
yeah. He's retained for quite a few economic development projects, this firm.
So you're saying that this covers not just the particular CID project, you're talking about others?
This is just for bond counsel.
Right, but I think Mr. Kaiser's question was,
My question is, it could apply to bond counsel on any project, not just related to SID.
Are you talking about section 4?
I'm talking about the entire, us hiring him, retaining this firm is not limited to just SID, it's to any issue the
This
SID.
agreement is just.
your mic's not
pertaining-
on.
This agreement is pertaining just to the NID bond counsel.
Okay, so it's just for that one,
Yeah.
okay.
Yes, but we have other agreements with them on other things that you're alluding to.
I think a lot of times he represents our interests, but when you have someone like Piper Jaffrey or some of the other bond underwriters we use, they usually are going to pick their own bond counsel, like
Exactly.
Gilmore Bell or someone else in the state. So
Exactly.
he, to my knowledge, has not done that on any of those issues.
Not on utility issues.
Yeah.
But he does, the CBR does represent us on other items.
Okay, any further discussion? Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
Motion is seconded. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Resolution pass. Number 9, resolution.
Mr. Mayor, I have a resolution appropriating money out of the treasury of the city of Moberly, Missouri in the amount of $771,058.36.
All right, you've heard the motion for the reading of the resolution. Is there a second?
Second?
It's been motioned and seconded. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? First and only reading.
A resolution appropriating money out of the treasury of the city of Moberly, Missouri in the amount of $771,058.36.
All right, you've heard the reading. I hereby certify that there is sufficient money standing to the credit of the city of Moberly, Missouri, unappropriated in the several funds covered by this resolution to meet the requirements of this resolution. Submitted, Gregory L. Hodge, City Treasurer. Any further discussion? Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been motioned and seconded. All those in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to official reports, department head monthly reports. We're not going to go through each one. You guys have had copies. There's a lot in the community development section. Does anyone have questions? We'll do them one at a time, or if you have more after that, we'll go back and forth. Mr. Brubaker.
Tom, I was wondering on you mentioned here the first round of properties, 23 properties are out for bid. You know what the date is on that? When? September 2nd. Okay. And then we'll know more at that time. Sounds good. Thank you.
Mr. Davis.
Yeah, Tom, the Silver Lane connector that you alluded to in your report, where would that come out on North Morley Street?
The proposal would be somewhere between the entrance to the street park facility and there's a lift station out there, if you're familiar with the lift station, that big pump house. So it's somewhere in between there. You know, we've kind of left gaps on our solar panels out there that could come through there.
It'd be all our property, we wouldn't have to acquire any right of way.
The developer that is doing the apartments back there, the Country Villas, that is asking for phase 2 of Country Villas,
Right.
would be donating the right of way across his property, and that would connect up to the city property, so the remainder of the property would be through the city maintenance facility.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anyone else? Mr. Kaiser.
Yeah, I have a question for the chamber, in your reports. What's the current status with, Missouri Department of Tourism with grants and so on?
Make sure it's on.
So, just so you guys know, for your information, the Missouri Division of Tourism, like many other state agencies, has cut their budget. They've cut it by $15 million, so they will no longer be doing any marketing matching grants. So this affects us in a pretty big way because that's a lot of the money that we rely on to market our community and market our destination. They might do a grant, a small grant in January. It just depends on how their budget goes and the rest of the year goes. There is an opportunity that we have applied for funding through them through CARES, but we don't know whether we'll get it, and it's very specific on what we can use that money for. So it's not like the other grant where we can kind of market whatever we want in the community. So we're definitely looking from our perspective at other marketing opportunities, really working with our partners, using a lot of free resources to market our community. So that's put a hindrance on us, but we'll get through it.
Questions, anyone else? Anyone? Good. All right, thank you. Mr. Hodge, I was looking at your sales tax revenue, and I just want to make sure if I'm understanding it after looking at the different taxes, but you're showing month compared to month of this calendar year versus the previous calendar year in the different numbers you got there. But as far as looking at the running total of where we are year-to-date, if I read that right, I know there's different ones, we're up like 0.85 when it's all averaged together, I guess would be the best way to put it. So we're slightly positive on our sales tax. If we had to look at it today and say, where are we for the time period? We're slightly to the positive.
Well, we're actually about 12% ahead, and that's for July and August.
I see.
So the August receipts are actually from like May payments.
So you're saying just for 2 months? Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, we're looking
Okay.
at basically just like what we had basically August 7th, about the time I produced these reports.
Okay. So when we look at things at the first of the year, we're going to be looking at July through December, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Greg, don't go away. I've got a couple of questions,
Go ahead.
please. I'm looking at your employee health insurance report, and it shows that we had 48,592 health claims, and then the pharmaceutical claims were 35,000 for a total of $83,781. And we did a contribution this month, I assumed. Do we do
Yes.
that on a monthly basis?
Yes.
Okay, and that was 114,997. And, but we budgeted 1,571,000.
Yes.
And that's not a 1/12 of what we budgeted for. Do we not do that on monthly?
No, I want you to see what the accurate picture is in the entire budget, what we budgeted, what you approved in the budget versus the actual of where we are. So I'm not trying to take, basically 1/12, like you were asking.
So we don't do that, we just,
No.
as needed basis, we transfer money into that.
Well, no, I'm, every month I put that full contribution in there. But I want you to understand where we are actual versus the total budget.
Now, I noticed then that June of this year, we had 360,000 in our health trust fund, 360,812 and
Yes.
some change. And in July, it went down 10,000, a little over $10,000.
Yes.
But it seems like we've had more, the money that we contributed to the trust fund was higher than our actual cost of the pharmaceutical claims and the health claims. Why did it go down $10,000?
I would have to get back to you on that because there's other factors besides what I'm reporting to you. I'm just kind of hitting, the highlights, the things that you guys are always asking about, but there's the reinsurance costs in there. Let's see, the admin fees. So those are all outlined on the profit and loss statement report.
So there's more money coming out of this trust than just the.
Than just those
pharmaceutical
highlighted
claims.
items, yes.
All right.
Mr. Brubaker.
Kind of along that same line on number 10, it's the comparative profit loss statement, dated July 2020. Those employer contributions, 114,997.
Correct.
And then right underneath that, employee contribution, 0. And then the year before, though, employee showed 18,520.
That was just a timing issue. We just missed getting those transfers made from the payroll fund into the health trust during
Show up.
July, so we'll catch those up in August. In fact, they were done right after the first of the month, but I couldn't report them.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Davis.
Yes. Looking at the interest income on the health, you showed $4,041 the previous year as income, interest income, but yet only $27.61. What do you attribute to that to? Is that
The
just
market really stinks
market?
right now. The market is terrible, plus last year we had more invested funds. I think there was 300,000 invested plus the regular cash balance, so there's roughly about 400,000 in there.
Right.
Versus where we're at now. But the market, the bottom just basically fell out of it. We were running at about, maybe getting about 2%, 2.5%, and we're down to getting 0.25% possibly.
How do we handle that? Do do we put it out for bids on, or do we just, we pretty much leave it in one place?
Right now, with the funding kind of I don't want to call it a precarious spot, but basically with a low balance, we don't really have the funds to invest right now because we don't know for sure where claims are going to go. We may, start getting hammered again. So we're holding off on making any investments at the current time, at least in the health trust.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. Anything else?
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so if there's no more questions about department head monthly reports, we will move on to number 11, appointment to the Moberly, Missouri Public Building Corporation. Mr. Crane.
Yes, this position is currently held by John Davis. He has submitted his information and said that he would like to be reappointed. We have no other applications on file.
I believe we had all these in work session, but does anyone have any other discussion? All right, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we got three. We got a motion by Mr. Kaiser and a second by Mr. Davis. All in favor, signify by aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. He's appointed. Number 12, appointment to the Housing Authority Board, which is Mr. Dennis Stevenson. Anything you want to add, Mr. Crane?
The current position, the gentleman passed away, Robert Smith, or Robert
Edwards.
I'm sorry, and they're submitting Dennis Stevenson's name to fill that position.
Okay. Any further discussion? Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
It's been a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and seconded. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. He's approved. Moving on to number 13, consideration for approval of renewal liquor applications. Madam Clerk?
Okay, we have Bratcher's Fuel, Bratcher's Market, Lula's, Memory Lanes, Nellie's, Shady's, Moberly 5 and Drive, Bud's Place, Eagles, Get It Going Express, and Pizza Hut, and they all have the necessary signatures.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Is there a motion to approve those? And a second?
Second.
Motion and seconded. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to number 14, a consideration of a motion to move the September 7th council meeting to September 8th. Anything you want to add, Mr. Crane?
It's Labor Day.
Okay, any discussion? Anyone opposed to that? You want to meet on Labor Day? Is there a motion to move?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
It's been motioned and seconded. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. September 8 it is. All right, is there anything else to come in front of the council before we move to the work session? All right, hearing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn from this session to the work session, followed by closed session. Is there a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is seconded. Roll call, please.
Jeffrey?
Yes.
Brubaker?
Yes.
Kimmons?
Yes.
Davis?
Yes.
Kaiser?
Yes.
All right, motion carries. We are adjourned from regular session, and we will move to the work session agenda. So, first up on the work session agenda is number 1, discussion of advertising of bids for the CDBG demo grant phase 1.
So as I mentioned earlier, we have 23 houses on that list right now that have been through all the process, environmental reviews, asbestos reviews, site reviews, and so they're out for bid. And August 2nd is when we are opening the bids. We're having a pre-meeting later in this month with all the contractors. Anybody that wants to participate has to be there and do a walkthrough with us on that event, so they can't say they missed anything in the projects. But and then we're asking for it to come at the work session this time, so if you have any questions or discussion about the process, we can talk about it now. And then when we receive the bids on the 2nd, we'd like to take it before the meeting on the 8th or the 9th, whenever, the next first meeting in September for approval. So.
All right, questions, anyone? I guess I have one. So is this done on a reimbursable basis? I know you're saying you got the first 23, so does that all have to, you get the bids and all that, and then it gets done, and then we're reimbursed,
Yeah, they have to review all of our receipts and.
so we don't pay the contractor till we get reimbursed? Or do we?
Typically pay, most of the time, if we have the funds available to cover that cost in these situations, we usually will pay those up front. Some of our airport projects, where the numbers are gonna be higher than what we have on hand, we won't pay those in advance. We'll have to wait for reimbursements, but on these, we plan on do the reimbursements or pay them and then getting reimbursed back to the state. It's usually within 30 days. They're pretty quick on those turnarounds.
So you think the state's credit's pretty good right now?
I don't know how, they've been good on turning around our invoices for the airport and other projects, so,
Okay.
yeah.
Oh, well, that's not saying much. Anyone else? Anyone opposed to moving that forward? All right, then we'll move that one forward to the regular meeting and move on to number 2, receipt of bids for infield dirt.
So, some of you might remember this. I didn't realize that infield dirt was so hard to get, but we approved this a few years ago and just never could get the supply. So we rebid it for those practice fields in Rothwell Park and Fox Park to bring in that infield dirt and make those fields a lot more playable and usable. The bid came in after getting 2 at $28,050 with Biddle. So we're recommending that that gets moved forward for approval so we can start that work.
All right, questions about the bids, anyone? Anyone opposed to move? Mr. Kaiser?
I assume this comes out of the park budget.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, any of those count numbers, when you see that 115, that's parks.
Some expensive dirt, but I guess if that's necessary. Okay, so no one's opposed to moving that forward? Okay, that'll move forward to the next meeting. Number 3, review of change order number 2 for the Moberly Street Sidewalk Project.
It's a deduction for $6,600 approximately. What that's for is on some of the drives and sidewalks in a segment of the road project, the slumps and air tests that they are supposed to meet did not meet our requirements. So they had a choice of like leaving it in there or taking it out. And so we went ahead and they wanted to leave it in, see what the tests came out. And so the cylinder brakes came in well above the required strength requirements. So we're allowing them to leave it, but we're still taking a deduct on the value since they didn't meet the air and slump test, so.
All right, questions, anyone? Mr. Kaiser?
What does that have from a long-term standpoint? What impact does that have?
The slump is really on your strength, that's affecting your strength, either adding more water in there to make it wetter when they put it in. The concerns you might have is you could have, long-term, you could have a higher chance of some spalling on the surface. In those areas, you could have, the air helps on flexibility and, but they've got it, we've used a lot of expansion joints and saw cuts are all deep enough, so I'm not real concerned about that.
So from a longevity standpoint, you're not.
I don't think we'll see a significant impact.
Anyone opposed to moving that forward? All right, hearing none, we'll move that forward. Move on to number 4, review amendment number 1 to MoDOT State Block Grant Agreement.
So this one's a big number. This is something, or the good thing about COVID, you can say, is because of this, we were going to get federal funding for 90% of this. And because we had this on the books for 2020, we're getting 100% funding. And so this is an agreement with them for $6,033,550. So that's the funding for the construction of the runway.
Questions, anyone? Mr. Kaiser?
I don't mean to be asking.
It's all
When
right.
do you expect construction to start on this?
They will probably start some preliminary stuff on electrical and underground things that are not impacting the runway surface yet this year.
Okay.
But tear out and start of construction would probably be late March, weather dependent, of 2021.
And how long will that take?
The total project, probably 6 months. We're going to have the main runway down, of course, but the crosswind runway, where it's an X shape out there, so we're going to time that where that should only be down for 30 days. So the whole runway out of service for only about 30 days of the project.
Is there any chance of losing this if we waited a couple months to start the construction, or or sped it up sooner, or?
Well, the problem you get into is, you want to, we don't want to start something going into winter time on this, so we don't want to fight that. So that's what the big issue. And then as far as delaying it, you want to get it done through the good months.
Okay. I know we've had interest in doing some things out at the airport that could affect, we'd like to do it before the construction, that's why I was asking. Okay.
So if we spend 5.8 and you're authorized for 6, do we get to keep the difference?
Yeah, again, it's a reimbursement, so I have to send them the
Oh,
receipts.
okay. Dang. All right, anyone opposed to moving that forward? All right, hearing none, we'll move that forward to the next meeting. And we'll move to number 5, a request to revise section 40-276.
This is a speed limit amendment, Quicks Road has been maintained at 25 miles an hour for many years due to the fact that soccer fields and no off-street pedestrian access. So with the completion of the sidewalk full length from Gratz Brown to Williams Street now, they felt like police reviewed that and felt like that was a reasonable request to move that to 30 miles an hour now that there's complete off-street access for pedestrians.
You mean Shepherd Brothers
Did I say something else?
Boulevard, right?
Yes, Shepherd Brothers Boulevard.
Okay.
Questions, anyone? Mr. Davis?
Who made the request, Tom?
Staff,
I'm sorry?
staff.
Oh, okay.
Just makes it consistent with the others, correct?
We've had numerous people contact us about the speed limit there, about, like, people drive accordingly to the thing, or you don't have residential right up on side of the property, people, they don't maintain 25 through there. So I'd say it's typical, the speeds are much higher than that on.
Makes it easier when giving tickets. You know it's all just,
Well, I'm just concerned, we've got schools there, the middle school and Grass Brown at the end of it, and,
that's what they are around it.
Excuse me?
They're 30 mile an hour around it, around the school.
Is Grass Brown 30?
30.
Yeah.
Further questions? Anyone opposed to moving that forward? No. Hearing none, we'll move that forward. Number 6, ordinances authorizing the issuance of $1,000,007 City of Moberly, Missouri Downtown Public Facilities Neighborhood Improvement District Limited General Obligation.
Yes, this ordinance authorizes the $1.7 million needed for the financing of the neighborhood improvement district. This is the water, sewer line, and some streetscape improvements. And then, like I said earlier, it's going to be using the property tax revenues from the SID and then the some utility revenues that were pledged to this project.
Questions about this future ordinance? Anyone opposed to moving that forward? All right, hearing no opposition, that will move forward. Then we'll move on to number 7, discussion of new text amendment for temporary living shelters.
Mr. Mayor, I see we have the Sanders here in the audience. I know he was one of the people that wanted to speak to that.
You've got 4 minutes, and please present your card to the clerk. Please state your name and address.
Ted Sander, 2457 County Road 1330 at Moberly.
All right, thank you.
I don't really have a whole lot that I want to say tonight, except that we had a real good discussion with the planning and zoning. We asked for some modifications to what was originally proposed. One of those they agreed to. Another one I think is still under some study. And the third one was they gave us reasons why it was real difficult to do what we asked to do. And that had to do with making the permit in the name of the organizations rather than the name of the church. And of course, the explanation was that the permit goes with the real estate. And so, if in the future we get to the point where we can move it from location to location, we'll have to do the multiple permits unless we get, some accommodation from the city at that time. You know, I don't really have anything else. I'd be happy to answer any questions that.
Well, the
you
current reading of it is not going to allow for multiple locations. It's going to
That's
be
correct.
one, only one.
Yes, that is correct.
Open at a time.
Right.
The current situation, the way I understand it is, we're allowed to have one location at a time. And at this point in time, we only have one church in the city that meets the qualifications zoning-wise to be eligible,
Which church is that?
First Christian. And that was one of our requests, that we, that we be allowed to have more churches than that in the downtown area that were eligible, but they're not in the right zoning. And my recollection of the planning and zoning meeting was that they were going to look at that and see what might be done with that. But having said that, you know, I think we are very satisfied if we just get something on the books that lets us operate. We want to be able to prove to the city and to the citizens of Moberly that we can do this in a responsible way, and a way that's not going to cause a lot of problems. And I would hope that if we can prove that if there are certain things that we would like to do to make our situation better, that we could come back to the planning and zoning and to the city and request those at that time.
Mr. Kimmons?
Yes, Mr. Sanders, I would just like to point out that it looks like a lot of hard work went into this, and I appreciate the negotiation stance that was taken at the P&Z. One of the things that I think's going to happen here is there's a learning curve to this. As
Absolutely.
You know better than most.
Absolutely.
And this that sounds like a no is kind of a wait and see, and it would be, you know, to everyone's benefit, once we have, you've cut your teeth on this thing.
Yes.
Because I know that you want to do it the right way, we want it done the right way. So I was really pleased with your efforts and with P&Z coming to terms on this. That's all I had.
All right, Mr. Davis?
Yep. Ted, I'm a little confused here. Are you happy with the changes that the P&Z is looking at making and that they presented to us? I mean, are you wanting more changes from them? Or, I mean, you.
The three issues that we had was that the original proposal was going to limit us to 15 people in the shelter, including staff, on any given night.
They've raised that to 20.
And they've raised that to 20, and that was our request. We actually requested it to be allowed to be raised to 20 people plus staff, which we anticipate being 3 or 4 people as the all-night staff. Planning and zoning passed it with moving it to a limit of 20 with the staff, including the staff. We're okay with that. Again, if we can prove that we can effectively operate this thing, and if there's a need, you know, and we don't know what the need is, but if there's a need for more spots in the shelter than that, and we can prove that we can operate this thing without problems, then I would anticipate at some point coming back and asking for modification to that.
I want to say I applaud you and your group for making this effort. I know it's been a struggle and there's been obstacles in the way and everything, but I do appreciate what you're trying to do.
Thank you.
And I know there's a need for it. So.
All right, thank you, Mr. Sanders.
Thank you.
I guess one question I have is, this has been in front of the planning and zoning, and this is the work session for the city council. I guess on behalf of the chamber, has the chamber made the chamber business members of downtown aware of this? And are they going to ever weigh in with any opinions about this, or have they been made aware of it? So do you think that's something that they should be aware? Okay, thank you. All right, anyone else, questions?
Can I make a couple comments? They just wanted to
Sure.
mention that sometime it kind of got lost in the planning and zoning meeting. I want to make it clear on this is that, this is the only requesting organization at this time has been, the churches trying to put together this group, but this ordinance is set up to be like all encompassing. So, I mean, while the churches are the only group requesting at this time, I mean, this is for warming shelters. This is all temporary living. So it's warming shelters, homeless shelters, it's the works. And so, we could have other groups requesting, a homeless shelter at some point in time as well. So it's not just this one issue, and I think they were kind of looking at it like we're viewing this issue for how it's going to regulate the churches in this particular plan, but this is all encompassing. So I just wanted you to keep that in mind. And that, while you mentioned the downtown, the zoning regulations that are in place will be B3 and M1, so the downtown B2 district is not applicable at this time for one. Yeah, so if this was approved, it's a conditional use permit anytime, so any location that they want to go in. So what he's mentioned is the one church that he's mentioned is off the downtown, it's outside of the downtown district down here, but it would still require a conditional use permit. So if this went into play, just like it is, they could get multiple locations approved and permitted, and then, have it at this location one week and another location the next week.
I guess getting back to the only one open at a time at any given point. So that's going to apply citywide, or what does that one apply to?
That's how I would look at it, is you could have one homeless shelter and one warming shelter operable at any time. You couldn't have two in service at the same location. So, I mean, you could have, like, if you had 2 or 3 churches that were willing to participate and went through the process, they could have maybe 3 churches or buildings or facilities permitted, and let's say this church is going to operate it for this month. That church could be in operation this month, and then they could have it go to another church the next month.
But each one of those locations is going to have to be indemnified. They're going to have to meet all the regs.
Yes.
And you guys are going to inspect that before
we
they can
said.
start.
That's what our point was, and Planning and Zoning Commission made that clear, that, each facility needs to be inspected and permitted individually because it's for that facility. So we're not permitting the group, we're permitting that facility.
Okay. Mr. Davis, then Mr. Kimmons. Oh,
Yeah. Would this prohibit, say, another benevolent group, whatever it be, outside of this Mr. Sanders represents, if they wanted to come in and create homeless temporary shelters, would that prohibit them from doing it if they were operating
Yes.
at the same time?
Mr. Kaiser?
I think I'm asking the same question. I want to clarify. Number one, homeless shelters and the warming centers are 2 completely different things.
It'd be 2 separate things. You could have one of each in operation, based on this.
Based on this, so this benevolent group can have a warming center, but you mentioned one at a time. They can have their warming center here operating one night, but if there's another group comes in and does a homeless shelter, there are 2 exclusive.
You could have one homeless shelter too. So you could have a homeless shelter with some other group,
Yep.
another approved location, and you could have a warming shelter at some location.
Okay. So 2 different, you can have those at the same time, because a few minutes ago, it sounded like you have one of the others, you only got one.
You couldn't have, if they had 3 churches approved, you couldn't have 2 of them in operation at one time. for
Under the
warming
same
shelters.
organization, right.
Yeah.
Now,
Period, not under the organization, period. There's only
That's
one
my
operator.
next question is, let's say benevolent group number 2 comes in, right? And is it a fight on not a fight, but is it first come, first serve on who gets to be a warming center that night?
That's how I would view it. If they're approved and operable, that's they'd be the group. And so what we've kind of talked about, and what he mentioned in there as well, was they don't really know the needs at this point right now either. So, I mean, if they come back and they say, hey, we've got 25 people to accommodate, and then that would be something that P and Z would review and say, there's a need here for 25 people, we could evaluate that and see that. But if, you may necessarily not want to have 2 warming shelters, that you have 10 people using this one and 10 people using this one. If there's a need where their capacity could meet the needs of the community, I don't know that we need to have multiple
So as of
locations.
right now, Benevolent Group number 1 has a warming center they opened up. If Benevolent 2 wanted to open up, it'd be sorry, they're sorry 1.
That's correct.
Okay, I just want to clarify the question.
I would mention, the way it's been proposed to staff in the past,
Can't hear you, Mr. Crane.
I'm sorry. The way it's been proposed in the past is that this group, and I don't know if it's the Ministerial Alliance or who the group is that Mr. Sander represents, but they've been working with multiple churches, and they're going to work together at coming up with a rotation
Sure.
in the future. So our presumption is that they're going to come to you and say, we need a conditional use for these facilities, and this one's going to operate these 2 weeks, then this one will be the next 2 weeks. So they're trying to share in the burden and provide a service in the community, the way it's been presented to us.
One last question. Since we don't know the need, hopefully they open this up and no one shows up, right? It's the hope. But if 2 months in this winter, they find out that they're constantly maxing out at the 20, and right now we're saying the steps are to go to P&Z, then come back to here, which goes through 2 meetings, it's going to take 2 more months to go through all that approval. Do we have a fast track for them that would allow us to skip P&Z and come to city council? Or, my concern is that if we're wrong and they actually are full at capacity and there's still more need, I would hate to see it take 2 or more months to make a change when there's truly a need. Is there a fast track possible here?
We don't have a fast track process, no.
I would be against that. I mean, that's why everything has rules, and if you go make an exception for one, then someone's going to say, well, let's skip the P and Z and everything for something else, and that's not consistent.
One of the reasons for that is this is a land use issue, and there's, a lot of state statutes that require us due process to neighbors and the facility that's requesting it. So fast tracking some things can work, but not when it's land use.
And to clarify, when I say fast track, I'm not saying 24 hours. I'm saying, can we shorten the window of 2 months to?
We have advertisement requirements that have to go through, meetings, and so those are all set by standards that we can't control.
Okay, that's a fair answer.
I mean, if you were a neighbor being affected, you wouldn't want to hear all of a sudden that somebody just skipped all the processes and you didn't get to come up here and have your say.
And frankly, this is putting in several spots that were not previously available, so I don't know that.
I guess my last question is, in this change, in this particular ordinance, is there a requirement in there as those different locations are designated to be used, that the police force is going to be notified of that? So my question, I guess, for Chief Link is, how much more complicated is it if you start looking at more than one site where you've got people that at 8 o'clock in the morning are going to go somewhere, and then you've got locations where you don't know where they operated for the night? The question is, how much more complicated is it for you to control? Yeah, no, the change of locations, and does our rule require that he gets notified where they're going to be?
I don't think so. And I don't know. I guess I'm missing what we're supposed to do or what our involvement in this is based on where that, because we're not going to do random checks. We're not going to do background checks. We're not going to do any of that type of stuff that I'm aware of anyway.
Okay, all right. Mr. Sanders, you want to answer that?
Mr. Mayor, if I could, there's a lot of things to be decided yet. But one of the things that is very clear in the guidelines that planning and zoning passed is that we've got to keep the police department informed of what we're doing and where we're doing it.
Okay.
I mean, that's pretty plain, and we are in the process of beginning to write our organization and management plan, and a lot of those kind of details will have to be addressed in that.
All right,
So
very well, thank you.
We intend to have the police well informed of what's going on, because if worst comes to worst, there may be a situation where we need their assistance. We hope that doesn't happen, but we want the police department to be aware of and involved in what's going on.
Sure, and I appreciate that you do, but I think, given what we had, which is a different group, that out on
Yes.
Woodland, we want to make sure we know how it's going to work before, because that was an after-the-fact situation where they became a homeless shelter or overnight shelter, and we had problems. We had problems with the neighbors, we had problems with where they went. So I think everything you can get up front and be
Yes.
better planned, which I think you will, the better this is going to have a chance to work. East Logan, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Mr.
Mr.
Davis.
Senator, I mean, to be clear, we're dealing with homeless people who may or may not be citizens of Moberly, but we're not dealing with criminals. So why would we need to notify the police every time that we're going to be open?
You know, if I could answer that, we don't really know. Some of these people are homeless. We don't really know the background of these people. And what we would like to get done, and there has been some, not by myself, but I think there has been some discussion with the sheriff's department about doing a background check on people that ask to be admitted to the shelter specifically for two things. Number one, do they have an outstanding arrest warrant? And number two, are they on a sex offender list? Those two things, the discussions that we've had to this point, a person that falls into either one of those categories may be disqualified from being allowed to come in. Now, I'm getting a little ahead of things, but that's the discussions that we've had to this point.
Thank you.
I would ask you to tread carefully on this. I mean, that's a.
Yes.
I'm just not comfortable with doing background checks on everybody that just because they're homeless. But
Right.
Mr. Kaiser.
One point I would like to make is we're not talking, with the warming shelter, we're not talking about just homeless people. We have a number of families that are in homes that have no heat, no utilities, but with children. So they have a home, they have a place to go to during the day, but at night when it's -5 degrees outside, a warming shelter would be helpful to them. So it's not just homeless people. I want to clarify that. The warming center is not just for them.
Well, I think the other point about why the police need to be informed is because if it's a warming shelter, when 8 o'clock rolls around, you've got a fair amount of potential people that are going to go somewhere. And Chief Link has told us before that we have quite a few downtown. So I think the business people downtown, the schools downtown, are all concerned where the mix of these people are going to go. Doesn't mean that they're a criminal or not, but it's just something that's, I think, good to know where everything's going, that's all.
not understanding that, Mr. Mayor. I've got a place downtown. I know Mr. Kaiser does. I could care less where they go.
Well, let's say
I
one
take
of
that
them.
back. I care where they go. I
Well, yeah,
want them to be
what
homeless.
if one of them is a sex offender and they don't run through and they're at
What's that
St.
got to do with
Pius?
The people downtown. I mean, I think it
'Cause
would
they
be
have a
better
business.
that they get off of the downtown streets and.
But they don't. That's the whole point. Chief Link, you want to enlighten us a little bit?
If
Where are the folks going?
Providing them a place to go where they can be warm, they're going to get off the streets of downtown.
But they don't. They go to the library.
They can go wherever they legally can go. We have no control over where they go. We have no loitering statutes. It would be trespassing on private properties. So they can wander up and down the streets of Moberly to their heart's content. It's a public sidewalk in a public area. Now, we run into this problem on other deals where people blocking sidewalks and things like that. Now, whether or not these folks are going to, you're asking me to envision where they could possibly go. I don't know where they're going to go. But I think it is reasonable to make the assumption that if they have a place to stay at night, they're not going to get very far from it. Now, where that place is apparently at Central Christian Church is where it's proposed to be at. My guess is they're not going to be very far, if they're going to have to be back there at a particular time of night. Last I knew, it was 5 p.m. entry time or something like that, or later than that.
Probably later than that. We haven't decided.
So we're guessing where they're going to go and what they're going to do. At least that's from my professional, it's.
So do you have some event of what you would call homeless people in the library right now?
I've been told that there are people that are supposedly without a place to stay that have been in the home, that have been in the library at various times.
And have you been called down there because of incidents?
Yes.
Okay, that's my point. Thank you.
Anything else?
All right, anybody else? Anyone opposed to moving that forward? All right, hearing none, we'll move that forward to the next meeting. Number 8, discussion of text amendment changes for living quarters in B2 district.
So the primary thing here was, as we see in more development and redevelopment in the downtown district, residential is becoming a higher priority in the downtown district. And so in the past, it was more set up for being a secondary use in the old days, where the storekeeper might live upstairs in his facility, but over time, apartments have occurred. And so this does two things. This cleans it up for apartments to be on the second level and also our upper levels and also in the basements, but it also makes an allowance for residential to take up part of the ground floor, as we're seeing smaller needs for retail type places downtown. The large storage and a lot of capacity on the downtown is not there as much. So this would allow a large ground floor store to take up to 50% of its ground floor space and utilize it for residential. However, it would require that you retain the frontage of the store, the retail, the street frontage as retail, and keep the residential in the back. And also it would require the entrances to be split up. So you wouldn't have, your storefront be the same approach to your rear apartments through that door. You'd have to have a separate entrance, preferably through the rear, but they could have a front, like a lot of times, in the downtown apartments, they'll have a side door that goes upstairs to the upstairs. They could utilize that or a facility like that. So that's what the goal of this ordinance is to really just make the residential cleaner for the downtown district.
All right? Questions about the change? Hearing none. Everyone okay with moving that forward? All right, we'll move that forward to the next meeting. I move on to number 9, discussion of new text amendments for cannabis odor control.
So this ordinance does a lot, it restates a lot of your state regulations, and so clarifies that, but it also, our goal with this was to put in some guidelines to give us some ability to deal with issues that might come up, not to aggressively go out and try to tackle these things. It's just at least have some provisions in place for, if the odor is leaving the property, or have ventilation requirements if we start seeing problems. And that's what it's set up for. It's not lengthy, but it deals with both residential and where the use of it would be, the on-site residential and on-site commercial locations. And if, I know you just got those, they weren't included in your packet, but if you have any questions from this, kind of brief.
I think we had a gentleman one night that said that if we're going to put this on as a control, that he found it objectionable to go by a restaurant and smell bacon.
Yes.
So are we going to be okay with this and not have to go down a road of a bunch of other
The
stuff?
good thing is the bacon plant does have extremely high requirements for their ventilation requirements, so I think
Okay.
He's referring to.
He was referring to.
He was talking about a restaurant,
Right,
not the bacon plant. That wasn't official then, but, okay, anyone have any questions about this?
So, Tom, which department will be responsible for going out smelling these facilities?
we're looking for
We're gonna have a
volunteers.
sniff patrol.
We're looking for volunteers.
Volunteers, okay.
It's kind of subjective, it's going to be one of those things where hopefully we won't have to deal with it, but like I say, at least we have some guidelines, so if we have problems or concerns with it,
Okay. And I assume they'll limit your staff time, how long they can stay out there and,
take hours to smell them, yeah.
okay.
I think you should arrange that so it's always after lunch, not before.
Yeah.
All right, any questions, anyone? All right, no one's opposed to moving that forward. We'll move on to 10, discussion regarding project costs for ESP contract. Who's the lucky person that has that tonight?
Ms. Murray? Is she able to talk? No? Mary, can you hear the?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Um, so the ESP contract for the work at the water plant, the wastewater plant, and the meter change out and the software upgrade um, had a certain amount of contingency funds put into the project um, because we weren't sure how the bids would come out on meter technology and the software and things like that. So what you have before you is um, it's not really a change order, it's a contingency allocation. And this is how ESP tracks how we're doing on our contingency. So we started off with $380,000. And then there have been some additions and deductions from that amount with the initial contract. And so you see those outlined. There was an flow meter, a portable flow meter to verify flow going to the distribution system at the water plant. That's item number one. There is some engineering to create a wastewater treatment plant model, which will tell us how much capacity we have for high strength wastewater if we would get an industry in or things like that. How much capacity we have at the wastewater plant, when we would need to do an upgrade in the future, how we could do nutrient removal, whatever. So that is $84,000. That's item number 4. And then item number 6 is the first A, B, and C is related to the meter change out. The city is in the process of doing an inventory to find all of the lead service lines in Moberly, so that we can upgrade those and remove them and put copper in place of those. Um, they would have had to do this work potentially anyway, since it's been 13 years since the meters have been looked at in some cases. This is just a way to vacuum out the pits, get ready for the meter change, and we did ask them to inventory lead lines as part of that. There was some wiring that needed to be done at the water plant, a change order that was a little bit more expensive there. The as-built drawings from the last upgrade was not correct. And the last item, E, is the cost for the software came in much cheaper than we had anticipated. So $202,000 is added back to contingency. So we started off at 380, and we are now at 366,386. So I think in discussion with Randall, since the project has already been approved and the funding has been approved, this is just more of an information item for the council. And I think we just need your nod to allow us to sign this contingency allocation form.
All right, thank you. Questions from council? Mr. Davis.
Mary, what do you attribute the cost adjustment for this Cassell system? It came at $200,000 is a lot of money for it to come under what we
Right. And
anticipated.
so when you buy software packages, you know, you can buy Microsoft or you can buy Apple. And so it's the same thing with software. There were some packages that were, you know, north of $500,000 that offer a whole lot more bells and whistles and functionality that, quite frankly, a city of our size with our staff would not utilize. And so, as part of the process that ESP helped us work through and RTS in selecting a software company, we were able to find a company that matched expanded capabilities, but at a reasonable cost. And we just found what we were looking for in a very cost-effective package.
Is this a flexible system that can be added to down the road in years to come that will keep us up to date and where we are Is it something that's going to be out of date in several years or a few years?
I don't think so. And the reason that I say that is when we were calling other cities that have the Neptune meters and Cassell, one of the questions that we asked people was how long have you had this software? We found one city that has had Cassell software for 40 years. So if you think about the technology improvements in the last 40 years, this company would not still be around if they had not improved over time. One of the things that attracted us was the fact that they offered a hosted program. It's online or in the cloud instead of us hosting it locally at City Hall. That's an upgrade that some of the other systems that we were talking to did not offer or offered at a much more expensive cost. One of the things that we found was ahead of many of the other software company demos that we had seen was they allow us actually to look at one screen. So you only have to have the customer record open for utility billing, and you can click and go over and see the customer's daily reads or hourly reads through the Neptune AMI system without leaving that screen. So, you know, that kind of functionality for us in utilities was important. In talking to Greg and the finance department, the My Excel feature that allows for building of reports and how they can manage some of that kind of stuff on the general ledger side and accounts payable. You know, I'm sure Greg can answer questions also, but they were very excited about all of the things that they were going to be able to do moving forward with this software. So we did visit 2 other communities that have had this software for a period of time, and they were all spoke very highly of them as far as updates and upgrades.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Anyone opposed to moving that forward to the next meeting? All right. Hearing no opposition, we'll move that forward to the next meeting. Anything else to come in front of the council?
Mr. Mayor, I noticed coming in that we had Miss Route 66, is that correct, in attendance tonight? Could we recognize her?
Sure. Who is Miss Route 66? Would you like to introduce her?
Here, I'm not sure who she is, but could you?
I think her last name's Christ. All right, welcome. Thanks for coming. Thank you, Mr. Davis. All right, so if there's no more to come in front of the council, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn to closed section, and we'll clear the chamber for the meeting here in closed session. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is seconded. Roll call, please.
Jeffrey,
Yes.
Brubaker,
Yes.
Kimmons,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Kaiser.
Yes.
All right, motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you all for coming.